There is a distinct feeling that comes over certain people when they leave their phone in another room or when they drive to the store without it. For a lot of the modern world, this sparks immediate panic. It feels like a severed lifeline, but for a specific group of people, that momentary disconnection doesn't bring panic. It brings a very quiet, almost invisible sense of relief. If you grew up before the late 2000s, before the world was permanently placed inside our pockets, your brain was wired in an environment that no longer exists. You belong to the last generation of humans who will ever know what it feels like to be truly unreachable. Understanding the psychology of people raised before smartphones isn't just about nostalgia. It isn't about claiming one era was better than another. It is about recognizing that the fundamental architecture of your personality, how you handle stress, how you view friendships, and how you process silence, was built in a world with different physical and emotional boundaries. Think about the concept of waiting. Today, waiting is treated as an error in the system. If you are in a line or on a train or sitting in a doctor's office, the default human behavior is to instantly look at a screen to numb the passing of time. But if you grew up before this technology, you learned how to simply exist in empty space. You stared out of car windows. You read the backs of cereal boxes. You sat on the front porch and just watched the street. Because of this, your brain developed a high tolerance for low stimulation environments. This is why, as an adult today, you might find modern life incredibly overwhelming. The relentless barrage of notifications, the fast-paced editing of modern media, the expectation of instant replies, it rubs against your psychological grain. You aren't necessarily anti-technology, but your nervous system is calibrated for a slower, quieter baseline. When you crave a quiet weekend with absolutely nothing planned, you aren't being lazy. You are actively trying to regulate a nervous system that feels overtaxed by a world that never stops talking. This difference also completely alters how you approach relationships and social obligations. In the era of landlines and physical answering machines, communication had a physical location. The phone was tied to the wall. When you left the house, you left the conversation behind. Because of this, the home functioned as a true psychological sanctuary. Once you closed your front door, the outside world could not demand your attention unless you allowed it to. Today, the concept of a boundary has completely dissolved. We carry the demands of our bosses, the anxieties of the news cycle, and the expectations of our extended social circles in our pockets, bringing them into our living rooms and our beds. For someone raised with a strict boundary between public and private life, this modern reality creates a chronic, low-level exhaustion. It is why you might feel an inexplicable sense of dread when your phone buzzes, even if it's a friend. It isn't that you don't love your friends. It's that your brain still fundamentally believes that when you are alone, you should be allowed to actually be alone. The modern expectation of being accessible 24 hours a day feels less like connection and more like a gentle, ongoing invasion of privacy. This physical distance also shaped a unique kind of social reliability. Think back to making plans before mobile phones. If you agreed to meet someone at a specific coffee shop at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday, you had to be there. There was no way to text them at 2:50 saying you were running late. There was no way to softly cancel at the last minute. You made a commitment, and you had to honor it. This embedded a deep psychological link between a person's word and their actions. It is why people raised in this era often feel deeply disrespected by modern flakiness. When someone treats plans as tentative options to be updated via text message, it doesn't just feel slightly annoying. To a mind wired in an analog world, it feels like a breach of trust. You were raised to view time and commitments as solid objects, not shifting suggestions. Then, there is the way you process information and solve problems. Before GPS and search engines, navigating the world required a degree of necessary friction. If you were lost, you had to unfold a physical map, or read the environment, or swallow your pride and ask a stranger for directions. If you wanted to know a fact, you had to look it up in an encyclopedia, or simply accept that you didn't know the answer. That friction wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a training ground for resilience. It taught you that not having immediate answers is a normal part of life. You learned to trust your own instincts, to be comfortable with a little bit of uncertainty, and to rely on your internal compass. Today, we have outsourced our memory and our problem solving to our devices. But the analog mind still retains that muscle memory of self-reliance. It is why you might occasionally feel a quiet sense of pride when you figure something out without looking it up, or why you prefer to deeply understand a few things rather than superficially consume 1,000 pieces of daily trivia. You value depth over speed. However, living with this analog operating system in a digital world comes with its own silent struggles. There is a specific kind of loneliness that haunts people who remember the before. It is the feeling of being an immigrant in the modern age. You can speak the language, you can use the apps, and you can participate in the culture, but it is not your native tongue. You might look around at a restaurant where an entire family is staring silently at their individual screens and feel a profound sense of grief for a type of shared human experience that is slowly disappearing. You miss the messy, uninterrupted presence of other people. You miss the days when being with someone meant they were entirely, undeniably in the room with you, not mentally divided between the physical table and a digital conversation happening miles away. This often leads to feeling alienated. You might be labeled as old school or a homebody because you choose to opt out of the constant digital performance. You might find yourself retreating, preferring the company of a good book, a quiet hobby, or a few close friends who still know how to hold a long, uninterrupted conversation. But this retreat is not a weakness. It is a highly evolved survival mechanism. By carefully managing what you let into your mind, you are preserving your own identity. In a society that is increasingly fractured, anxious, and deeply distracted, the traits you developed before the internet took over are actually incredibly valuable. Your capacity for deep focus, your comfort with silence, your ability to distinguish between an urgent notification and something that actually matters, your expectation of real, uninterrupted presence from the people you love. These are not outdated habits. They are anchors. You belong to a unique bridge generation. You have one foot in the tangible, dirt and concrete reality of the past, and one foot in the digital acceleration of the future. You understand the convenience of the modern world, but you are not entirely hypnotized by it. You still remember how to be alone without being lonely. So the next time you feel a wave of fatigue from the endless scrolling, or the next time you purposefully leave your phone behind just to feel the quiet air around you, know that there is nothing wrong with you. You aren't falling behind. You are simply remembering a different way to be human. And in a world that never stops rushing, knowing how to stand still is a rare and beautiful thing.